here's Jess. So she's the pattern cutter here at George Cleverley's. So she's been here for just over 2.5 years now, and she makes the majority of the patterns here in the workshop. So what she'll do first of all is make the mean form. So she'll measure out the certain points on the last. So we have a set standard point for all George Cleverley caps, vamp points, and the top of insteps and back heights.
Yeah, so this gets into house style, kind of consistencies that one would see across all your shoes.
If you went to 3 different shoemakers and ordered exactly the same shoe, they will all be slightly different because the cap length, the vamp point is what's unique to the company. Mm-hmm. So obviously George proportionately, he worked what he visually works well with a shoe. So we always work to those. So that's obviously graded to each size of shoe. So if you're a size 6 or a size 12, there'll be that balance between the cap, the vamp, the laces, how that all looks. So when you see a sample, you know, you might not necessarily be the same size as the sample, but it will proportionately be the same as that, but in your size.
In your size.
Yeah.
And so that's going to overall balance of, kind of the balance of the shoe.
Yes, I mean, that obviously is, part of it is denoted by your foot, because obviously where your foot bends and flexes, you can't have lots of bulky materials in that part because you don't want that cutting into your foot. Mm-hmm. Obviously you're considering the ankle bones, so you don't want them cutting up underneath. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you've got to get your foot into the shoe as well, so it can't be so high cut and not have any give to be able to slide your foot in easily. But we're going to make you a pair of shoes that first of all fit perfectly, but then we're going to make you the best looking pair of shoes that we can.
Beautiful shoes. So right here Jess is, I guess, at the beginning stages of working on the pattern.
So she's laying the paper onto the last to create the mean form. Mm-hmm. So first of all you'll create a mean form, and then from that, so you'll be able to make a master standard. Okay. So that's really what's dictating the whole of the style of the shoe. Mm-hmm. And then once you've got the mean master standards, so then you can take each of the components off of that. Okay. So then you'll have obviously the vamp, cap, quarters, etc.
And so the master standards being, you know, just the overall kind of master measurements of the last, right? Because every last is totally different. It's a bespoke last.
Yeah,
so your patterns, you know, really do have to be, you know, handmade for each pair of shoes.
Yes. Each foot is different, so you're thinking about, like I was saying, say entry into the shoe, say getting that balance right of, you know, it visually looking right for your shoe, and then obviously, so to have all of the components for the clicking that comes next.
And how much of, you know, how many kind of measurements of the last are then going into the actual pattern at the mean lat? Like
well, the thing is, I mean, I suppose each one, say, there are 4, I suppose, key measurements, or well 5 really, that come from the last, and then the other measurements are what we use as standard. So they're sort of allowances and underlays that are just obviously the best way to construct a shoe.
So it's interesting how much of a difference, I mean, the pattern really does make. I mean, I'm thinking just of the Baron DeRidi model I have. I mean, the evolution of the pattern from the first pair to the second pair is quite dramatic.
Yes, it is quite dramatic.
And so that's part of, I guess, kind of the bespoke process is, you know, you're working with your customers to really understand their personal preferences or interpretations of the pattern itself, right?
Exactly.
So how does that, I mean, is that normally done? I mean, if a customer comes in and they really have a specific idea of what they want, how do you mock that up before it actually, you know, you're cutting and doing a trial shoe?
Well, I suppose usually you'd have to consider what their foot shape is like, see if it would be feasible as well. And I suppose, for example, if you're making a DeRidi casual shoe, you'd have to consider the width of the customer's foot. You'd really have to work on an apron. What an apron is what sits on top like this. So they come in different widths, and you really have to make it so that it looks like it will fit comfortably on the client, but at the same time more sophisticated and well-refined apron. So the shape is very important, I reckon. For example, the Baron de Reed shoe, I'd say.
And so these are kind of mastered patterns that you know, have the overall symmetry and shape, and then you would cut or trim those down based on the shoe.
So I used to draw them all by hand. I still do, but I used to draw them just freehand for every single one. But you know, it's a very busy place here, and we like to have things done quickly and on point. So what I've done is that I've made different standards that I could work with and change slightly. So this would be something like a squared off casual. So depending on how thick the foot is, I might cut it down a little bit, you know, something like that. That's what I've done.
And then how do you, I mean, are you making it asymmetric so that, you know, here this gentleman has a particular high instep, right? So, you know, maybe it's going to be a little bit longer, you know, on the exterior side, just because, again, you've got an asymmetric foot, you know, but you're trying to achieve something that visually looks symmetrical.
Yes. So with each foot, it's important to get the symmetry by working with particular measurements. So I would usually split the foot down in the middle. So I know exactly where the middle point is. Doesn't matter how big, how wide it is on this side or how wide it is on this side. I'm always going to split it down the middle, same as the back. And then that way I'll be able to work out the inside form and the outside form that I've done.
You know, what would be next? What are
the next part? It'd be using the inside and outside form. I'd make a master standard. So I'm going to convert both of these into one whole, basically, and I'll start working my pattern style on that one. So I've made a master standard with the inside and the outside form of the shoe. So what I do is that I put them together and I straighten out the lines. And following the measurements that I've made before on the last, I will now draw out the design. So using the standard, I also made a template so I can have accuracy as well. I'm going to make a traditional Oxford brogue. So this is where the vamp point is that I've marked out. So
and that's from the last?
That's from the last.
And so these are basically your master patterns that you're kind of tracing the lines of.
Yes. Or I can draw freehand, up to me.
Of course,
So there we go, that's the vamp.
And then this point right here is the tip of the toe?
That's the tip of the toe, correct. And now I will measure out where the cap is, which according to me was 3 inches up. So here we go. And there we have it.
So we've got what, the inside and the outside?
That'll be the inside line, and this will be the outside line. So it has to be right below the ankle.
And because the inside ankle is up higher,
a bit higher than
so you can have more allowance, and then the outside ankle
has to be dropped lower.
Dropped lower. And is that ever? I mean, you did this freehand, and you know, you've done it so many times that you just know how to do it. But I mean, I guess if a customer has any kind of peculiarities to their foot, then you would incorporate that here also.
I'd have to measure and figure out the measurements to see.
And would that be indicated in the last, or would you just know that with the paperwork that kind of travels with the shoe?
Both. So I would have to measure the last, and then I'd have to draw it according to the measurements. But I'd have to keep working together to make sure it fits all the time. So as I draw, I will put it against the last.
What about the heel? I mean, the heel is another important part that kind of, you know, seats the shoe. What are you thinking about? I mean, of course, you know, Adam has done the work to, you know, to actually incorporate, you know, the anatomical kind of elements into the last itself. You know, what are you thinking about whenever you're doing the pattern? Or is it just a simple, like, you know, you're just drawing it to match, or are you having to put other kind of, you know, thinking or kind of allowances into that?
Sometimes the designs would have to drop a bit further up. So if you have disproportionate foot, for example, so if you're a bit larger here, then maybe this might have to sit a bit further along.
Okay.
It's just making it look right, depending on what footwell I've got.
Yeah. And at this point, I mean, you've been doing it for so long. Are you able to really kind of visualize that, or, you know, is it once you get to the point where you cut these out and lay them back on top of the last that you're able to kind of see and further refine?
It's just about thinking quick on your feet, so to speak.
Yeah,
but
of course.
sometimes I might just use this and lay it on for accuracy, and then at times I might even draw on the last to work out where it is as well.
Okay.
So
absolutely.
I always do it like that.
And I've seen that before, I think, on some Instagram shots of, you know, the actual pattern literally sketched onto the last.
Yes.
And then I guess you would take those measurements and...
Yes, and then incorporate to the pattern.
Okay, what's next?
So now that I've got all the major points drawn out, I can then start with the design. So I'm going to do some broguing today on the vamp.
Okay.
So start some stitching. I just have to indicate to the closer where I'd like these designs to sit. So these are more technical drawings, I suppose. They give information on how things should go when they're put together.
So Adam would click, right? But then whenever you send the you know, the leather off to the closer, you're including with it the pattern so that they know exactly how it is that you intend for it to be stitched.
Yes.
And the broguing, I mean, is that cut off here, or is that something the closer would do?
The broguing is something the closer would do.
Okay.
So I
Because they're stitching it together.
Yes.
And then they're further kind of checking, you know, the measurements on the pattern to make sure that as they're stitching it together, you know, it has the proper allowances.
Definitely, and we'd also send them the last.
Okay.
So that they'd be able to get the proportions right. So they would typically pull their patterns over.
Okay.
See if it fits.
So, I mean, you could really see the shoe coming together here now. I mean, it's really quite exceptional how quickly all of a sudden it comes together.
Yes. And if I just cut it out and lay it on the last, you'll be able to see how the design fits and envision it on leather. So let me just quickly do this. Okay, so I'll lay it back on the points that I've drawn out.
Okay, so we've got the vamp, the cap, and the edge, and then here is where the shoe
should fit where I've marked it precisely as it is, and the design should fit on the foot.
It's going to be a beautiful shoe.
So there we have it, and then now.
So this is a cap toe semi-brogue.
Yes, it's a straight cap semi-brogue. Correct. Yes.
Beautiful.
Yep. And
so then what's next? Where does this go next then?
The next step, I'd actually have to make the separate pieces.
Separate. Ah, that's right. Okay.
Because this is a shoe as a whole, but I have to make the counter separate, the vamp separate.
And at that point, you're just kind of tracing it. You know, you know how large it is, right? So you'd kind of trace it and then work in your allowances.
And the different pieces.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jess.
You're welcome.
This is so great to see this.
You're welcome.
It's beautiful work, and you know, it's just kind of magic to see it all come together like this. So, you know, thanks for sharing that with us.
Thanks for your time as
well.
well.
No, my pleasure. Cheers.
Yeah.